The lights of 1980 still shimmer faintly in our memories, a time when the camera didn't just capture faces, it created them. In that world of neon and noise, one woman seemed made of both beauty and fire. Her name was Vanity, born Denise Katrina Matthews, and for a moment, she was everywhere. She sang, she acted, she lived like the spotlight would never fade. But what happens when the world falls in love with your image and forgets the person behind it? This is not just a story about fame, it's about the price of wanting to be seen and the peace she finally found when she walked away. Let's get into the Vanity story right now. Let me know where you're watching this from in the comments. Grab yourself a warm drink, maybe a cup of water or tea, sit back, and let's start this journey together. Before the lights, before the fame, there was a little girl standing in front of a mirror, holding a hairbrush like a microphone. Her name was Denise Katrina Matthews, and long before the world knew her as Vanity, she was already dreaming about the stage. She was born on the 4th of January 1959 in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada, one of 6 daughters in a house filled with noise, struggle, and the echo of 2 very different worlds. Her mother was a white Polish Jewish woman. Her father was black, a proud but broken man. Together, they gave her a childhood full of contradictions, love that hurt, and dreams that seemed too far away. Denise's early years were marked by abandonment. When she was just 4 years old, her mother left her on a stranger's doorstep after falling in love with another man who didn't want to raise a mixed-race child. That moment, that quiet betrayal, would follow her for the rest of her life. Her mother eventually brought her back to her father, but the reunion didn't bring peace. He refused to claim her as his own. He was a violent alcoholic, and the bottle turned him into someone cruel. He beat her for hours, using whatever was nearby. She tried to hide the bruises from classmates, pretending she had fallen or tripped. Because how do you explain pain that deep when you're only a child? In an interview with Jet magazine years later, Denise confessed that the abuse left her with a shattered sense of worth that haunted her for 15 years. She said she would look in the mirror and see only what her father told her she was, nothing. And yet, inside, there was still a spark, something fierce, something unbreakable. At just 5 years old, her father once asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" She answered without hesitation, "An actress, and I want to build a church for Jesus." It was such an innocent declaration, but in that answer was her entire life, the rise, the fall, the faith that would one day save her. School was no escape. She was shy, bullied, and often reminded that she didn't belong anywhere. Her mixed-race identity made her an outsider, too light for some, too dark for others. She once said that in high school, boys wanted to date her but didn't want anyone to know. It was a cruel kind of admiration that taught her early what it meant to be seen but not truly accepted. When she was 15, her father died. She said she watched her mother collapse under the weight of that loss, sinking into alcoholism and depression. Denise ran away from home more than once, chasing an idea of freedom that kept slipping away. But by her late teens, something began to shift. Her beauty, the same face that once felt like a curse, started to open doors. At 17, she entered and won the Miss Niagara Hospitality pageant in 1977. The applause was like a new language, one she understood instantly. The following year, she competed for Miss Canada. She didn't win, but the dream no longer felt impossible. Soon after, she packed her bags and left Niagara Falls for New York City, chasing not just fame, but a chance to reinvent herself. In the city that never slept, she found a small modeling agency that saw what others had missed. They signed her. She appeared in local commercials, fashion ads, even flew to Japan for a few modeling jobs. It was the beginning of a transformation. She was learning how to pose, how to project confidence, how to survive in a world built on appearances. But behind every camera flash, there was still that little girl with the brush, pretending not to be afraid. In 1980, Denise landed a small part in a horror film called Terror Train, and later starred in a low-budget fantasy film called Tanya's Island, credited as D.D. Winters. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was proof that she could cross the line from dream to reality. She once admitted she knew she wasn't the best singer or actress, but that didn't stop her. She just wanted to belong somewhere. The pain couldn't reach her. Looking back, every step from beauty pageants to modeling, from Canada to New York, was a quiet act of defiance. She was telling the world, You can break me, but I will still shine. Um, Before the red carpets, before the fame, there was only Denise, a young woman with a broken past, standing at the edge of a new beginning, still believing that somewhere, under all the scars, there was a reason she was born to be seen. New York had a way of testing every dreamer who came through its streets. For Denise Matthews, the city was both a teacher and a mirror showing her who she was and who she might become. Modeling gave her a glimpse of success, but also its emptiness. She worked photo shoot to photo shoot, selling a smile that didn't always feel like hers. By 1980, she had managed to appear on the cover of Nightlife Unlimited's album Let's Do It Again, and soon after, she found herself in front of film cameras. Her first small role came in Terror Train, a slasher film starring Jamie Lee Curtis, followed by the B-movie Tanya's Island, where she played a woman trapped between fantasy and desire. It was raw, daring, and exposed not just on screen, but emotionally. Hollywood noticed her, but it was a fleeting kind of notice, the kind given to someone beautiful, not yet someone respected. Denise understood that if she wanted to last, she needed more than a pretty face. She needed a sound, a style, something unforgettable. In 1982, she appeared on the album cover of Cameo's Alligator Woman, a funk record that shimmered with energy. That same year, fate and maybe a bit of chaos placed her in the same room as Prince at the American Music Awards. The story has been told many ways. Some say she arrived as Rick James's date. Others claim she went alone, ticket in hand, chasing opportunity. But what mattered most was what happened inside that room. Prince saw her, really saw her, and decided she was the reflection he'd been looking for. He approached her with a strange request. He wanted to exchange jackets. It was his way of saying, "You and I, we're the same kind of different." When they realized they could fit into each other's clothes, it became a symbol, a mirror image that would define both their careers. Prince invited her to join a new musical project, first called The Hookers, then Vagina, and finally Vanity 6, a trio meant to embody sensual confidence. He renamed her Vanity, claiming she was the female version of him. It was both a compliment and a prophecy. Performing in lingerie, singing songs that blurred the line between empowerment and provocation, Vanity became an icon of bold femininity. Their debut album Vanity 6 dropped on the 11th of August 1982, climbing to number 45 on the U.S. Billboard, 200 and number 6 on the R&B chart. The lead single, Nasty Girl, shot to number 1 on the dance charts, a fiery anthem that defined the decade's unapologetic edge. But behind the success was an inner conflict. Vanity admitted that she didn't always feel comfortable with the image Prince created for her. She had dreamed of elegance of Diana Ross, not decadent. Yet she played the role perfectly, because she believed it was her only way in. By the end of 1982, she had become one of the most talked-about women in pop culture, adored, desired, misunderstood. She was living the dream she had built as a child in front of a mirror, but the reflection was beginning to blur. By late 1982, Vanity 6 had become more than just a group, it was a sensation. The song Nasty Girl played in nightclubs across America, the lyrics bold and unapologetic. The world saw Vanity as the fearless face of female sensuality. She was the kind of star who could silence a room just by walking into it. But behind the shimmer, something darker stirred. Prince was a genius, but he was also controlling. He shaped Vanity's voice, image, and even her interviews. She once said she went along with his ideas not because she believed in them, but because she didn't want to lose the chance she'd fought so hard to earn. Still, their chemistry was undeniable. The media called them mirror lovers, two reflections of the same creative fire. Their photo shoot for Rolling Stone in April 1983, with Vanity draped across Prince, her hands slipping down his side, sent shockwaves through pop culture. It wasn't just provocative, it was symbolic. They were rewriting what fame looked like, and it was electric. But fame, like fire, doesn't burn forever. The same passion that brought them together began to tear them apart. Vanity wanted independence. Prince wanted control. She dreamed of becoming an actress, of crafting her own identity, but Prince had other plans. When he began filming Purple Rain, she was supposed to play the female lead. But their arguments about money, about freedom, about his growing jealousy grew unbearable. Vanity wanted to explore new opportunities, even considering a role in Martin Scorsese's The Last Temptation of Christ. Prince, unable to let go, replaced her with another woman. The name changed from Vanity 6 to Apollonia 6, and just like that, the chapter closed. The breakup was both professional and personal. Prince continued his ascent, while Vanity walked away from the world he built without looking back. For the first time in her adult life, she was on her own, free but uncertain. That same year, 1984, she signed with Motown Records, hoping to prove she could stand without Prince's shadow. Her debut solo album, Wild Animal, came out on the 10th of November, 1984, led by singles like Pretty Mess and Mechanical Emotion. The songs climbed the R&B charts, earning moderate success. Critics praised her confidence but still measured her against her past. She was trying to rebuild herself, but the world only wanted the version of her that Prince had invented. Yet Vanity kept pushing. In 1985, she landed her first major film role as Laura Charles in The Last Dragon, a cult classic produced by Berry Gordy. The film gave her what music couldn't a chance to be seen as an actress, not a fantasy. Audiences loved her charisma. Her on-screen chemistry with co-star Taimak felt genuine because, for a while, it was. She was living her best life touring, filming, appearing on magazine covers. But success came with new temptations. The late nights, the parties, the endless pressure to stay beautiful, it all began to chip away at her spirit. She once said that Hollywood was a playground with no morning after, and by then, the mornings had started to hurt. Still, in those brief years, she achieved what most only dream about. From Nasty Girl to The Last Dragon, Vanity had become both muse and mystery, the woman who could conquer the stage yet remain unknowable. She had climbed from abuse, poverty, and rejection into a life of fame and adoration. But deep down, the same little girl from Niagara Falls was still searching not for fame this time, but for peace. By the mid-1980 decade, Vanity was everywhere. Her voice, her image, her very name had become synonymous with allure. Hollywood couldn't get enough of her. She was no longer just the woman who once stood beside Prince. She was Vanity, the brand, the fantasy, the face on every wall. In 1985, she stepped into a new kind of spotlight film. The Last Dragon hit theaters that spring, blending martial arts, music, and urban fairy tale energy in a way that only the 1980 decade could. Vanity played Laura Charles, the dazzling club singer who captured hearts with her warmth and confidence. The role fit her like a glove, glamorous, magnetic, vulnerable beneath the shine. Audiences fell in love. For many, it was the first time they saw her not as a muse, but as a leading woman. She glowed on screen not just in the light of cameras, but in the admiration of millions who saw something real beneath the sparkle. Even critics who dismissed the film as camp couldn't deny her star power. That same year, her presence extended beyond movie screens. Vanity appeared in Playboy magazine, a move that shocked some and fascinated others. She was reclaiming her image, telling the world that her body, her story, and her choices were her own. But the biggest proof of her star status came when her music continued to climb. In 1986, she released her second solo album, Skin on Skin, featuring the single Under the Influence, which reached number 6 on the dance charts. The album captured a more mature Vanity, confident, sultry, and self-aware. She was no longer chasing approval. She was defining her own rhythm. Hollywood opened wider doors. She starred in Never Too Young to Die alongside John Stamos, then appeared in 52 Pickup with Roy Scheider and Anne Margret, names that gave her credibility in an industry that rarely allowed pop stars to cross over. Directors admired her screen presence. She could shift from playful to piercing with a single glance. On red carpets, Vanity radiated the calm assurance of a woman who had survived more than anyone realized. The flashbulbs didn't intimidate her anymore. She had learned to live inside them. To the outside world, she had it all: beauty, fame, success, and a name that everyone remembered. But even in triumph, there was restlessness. She was seen, adored, and photographed, yet rarely understood. Behind her laughter at premieres was a quiet fatigue. The parties felt longer, the nights heavier. She once described Hollywood as a carnival of mirrors, everyone chasing their reflection until they forget who they are. For a while, she managed to keep that truth buried under diamonds and applause, but success has a way of amplifying whatever pain still lingers. The little girl who had once been beaten for dreaming was now applauded for existing, yet the applause couldn't fill the silence that waited when the music stopped. Still, at the height of her fame, Vanity carried herself with grace, a paradox of strength and fragility. To the world, she was untouchable. But to those who looked closer, she was already standing at the edge of something she couldn't quite see the beginning of her fall, and perhaps the start of her redemption. Fame is a strange companion. It promises love but feeds on loneliness. For Vanity, the applause that once lifted her now began to feel like a wall, a shimmering barrier between who she was and who the world wanted her to be. By 1986, she had everything most people dream of: a successful career, money, attention, and beauty that could stop traffic. But success in Hollywood is rarely gentle. Behind closed doors, the pressure to perform, to stay desirable, to outshine the next rising star began to wear her down. The same city that built her was quietly consuming her. Vanity had always been open about her struggles with self-image. The trauma of her childhood never truly left. It only hid beneath makeup and lights. Now, in her late 20s, she found herself surrounded by people who loved the illusion of her, the Vanity, who never tired, never aged, never faltered. But Denise, the woman beneath, was still bruised. That was the year she met Nikki Sixx, the volatile bassist of Mötley Crüe, and together they became the kind of couple tabloids couldn't resist. Their chemistry was undeniable, electric, but it was also toxic. They lived fast, partied harder, and spiraled deeper. Cocaine became the common language of their affection. He later admitted that she taught him how to freebase. She would later call herself a glutton for punishment. In the chaos of their relationship, physical violence erupted. There were stories of fights, of bruises, of mornings spent apologizing through hangovers and shame. In one interview, Nikki said she used to talk about Jesus even while they were high, like she was fighting for a piece of her soul that refused to give up. By 1987, her career began to lose its balance. She still appeared in films like Deadly Illusion with Billy D. Williams, and on television in Miami Vice and The New Mike Hammer, but the sparkle that once defined her performances began to dim. She was working to stay visible, but fame was moving on the same way it always does in Hollywood. That year, she posed for Playboy again, admitting later that it wasn't out of empowerment this time, but desperation. The money was running low, the offers fewer, and the addiction stronger. Every decision seemed to lead her further from the life she once imagined. By 1988, she tried to recover, checking herself into rehab after filming Action Jackson. It was her way of saying, "I want to live." But the damage ran deep, physical, emotional, spiritual. She was still fighting the mirror image that Prince had given her years ago. The reflection that once felt powerful now looked hollow. In the quiet moments, Vanity began to question everything: fame, love, even her name. Vanity had brought her to the top, but it also chained her there. And deep down, she knew she couldn't stay. The peak of her career, the bright lights and glittering parties, had come with a hidden cost. She had become the woman the world wanted, and in doing so, she lost the one she was meant to be. It would take years and a near-death experience before Denise Matthews finally reclaimed the thing she had been searching for all along her piece. When the applause fades, the silence can be deafening. For Vanity, that silence came slowly. One missed call, one canceled appearance, one night too many spent alone. By the late 1980 decade, she was no longer the woman Hollywood chased. She was a shadow of the image that had once defined her. The years of fast living, endless parties, and drug use began to take their toll. She had escaped the spotlight, but not the memories that haunted her. Each night, she tried to fill the emptiness with anything that numbed it: cocaine, alcohol, fleeting affection. But the more she searched for comfort, the farther she drifted from herself. After Action Jackson in 1988, she tried to start over. She checked herself into rehab, hoping to break free from addiction. For a brief moment, there was hope, the kind that comes from exhaustion rather than strength. She wanted to live, but she didn't yet know how. Even when the work dried up, her beauty remained, but it had changed. There was a fragility in her now, a quietness that made people look twice. Friends said she carried herself differently, like someone who had seen too much. The woman who once sang Nasty Girl now avoided her own reflection. In 1991, she took a small role in an HBO series, Tales from the Crypt. It was one of her last Hollywood appearances, and it came at a time when her health and spirit were both faltering. The next year, while working on the film Da Vinci's War, she met actor Sam J. Jones, the man who would unknowingly change the course of her life. They talked between takes, long conversations about pain, about faith, about the meaning of survival. One day, he invited her to church. At first, she laughed it off. She was Vanity, after all. Church wasn't part of her world. But something in his words stayed with her. That Sunday, she went. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. It was a small congregation in California, simple and sincere. When she opened the Bible, she later said, it was like reading a script written just for her. She began to cry quietly at first, then uncontrollably. Somewhere between the verses, between the words about forgiveness and grace, Denise Matthews came back to life. But redemption rarely comes easy. Her body, already fragile from years of abuse, began to fail her. In 1994, she suffered a near-fatal overdose. She collapsed, was rushed to the hospital, and placed on life support. Doctors said she had 3 days to live. Both kidneys were failing. She was blind, her blood pressure unstable, her heart weak. And yet, in that sterile hospital room, she claimed she heard a voice calm, familiar, divine. If you walk away from vanity, it said, I will give you life. When she opened her eyes again, she believed she'd been given a second chance. But that chance would mean leaving everything behind. When Denise Matthews woke up from that coma, she wasn't Vanity anymore. The name that had once paid her bills, filled her closets, and made her famous now felt like a curse. She said she heard Jesus speak to her that night, and from that moment on, she decided to let the past die. She threw away everything connected to her old life, every photograph, every video, every award. She burned hundreds of tapes, shredded magazine covers, even discarded her platinum records. That woman was gone, she told friends later. God saved me, not vanity. For the first time in her life, she found peace in simplicity. She stopped chasing fame and started chasing faith. She traveled, sharing her testimony in churches across the United States and abroad. People came expecting to see a former celebrity. Instead, they met a humble, radiant woman who spoke about grace with the same intensity she once brought to a stage. She described her new life as a trade, the spotlight for salvation. The woman who once performed in lingerie now stood in pulpits, preaching about redemption. The same voice that once sang Nasty Girl now told people to turn away from songs like that. Her transformation shocked the world, but to her, it was the only story worth telling. In 1995, she married Anthony Smith, a football player for the Oakland Raiders. They met during a community event for children, and 3 days later, she proposed to him. It was impulsive, full of hope, a reflection of her new belief in divine timing. But their marriage soon turned turbulent. Denise would invite homeless people into their home, offering them food and shelter. Anthony, still living by the world's rules, couldn't understand. Their arguments grew until the love they'd built crumbled. By 1996, they divorced. It turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The following year, Anthony Smith was charged with multiple murders. Denise said she thanked God every day that he had pulled her out before darkness took her again. From then on, she dedicated her life entirely to ministry. She founded Pure Hearts Ministries in Fremont, California, spending her days preaching, mentoring, and praying for those who'd lost hope. She gave away most of her money, lived modestly, and asked for nothing in return. Still, her body never fully recovered from the damage of addiction. The kidney transplant she received kept her alive, but not strong. She was often sick, in and out of hospitals, yet she never complained. Pain, she once said, reminds me that I'm still here, that God still has work for me to do. Enzik. Those who met her later in life said she glowed with a quiet peace, the kind that doesn't come from fame or fortune, but from surrender. She had finally become what she once told her father she wanted to be, an actress who built a church for Jesus. The world may have forgotten Vanity, but Denise had found something far greater grace. In the years that followed her transformation, Denise Matthews lived quietly, but her voice carried further than ever before. No longer vanity, no longer the woman built by Hollywood's illusions, she became a symbol of what it means to truly begin again. She founded Pure Hearts Ministries in Fremont, California, speaking in small churches, schools, and community centers across the country. Crowds gathered, not for spectacle, but for sincerity. She told her story with disarming honesty, how fame had promised her everything and left her with nothing, how addiction had nearly killed her, and how faith had given her back her life. People came to hear her because she wasn't preaching from perfection, she was preaching from pain. She didn't stand above anyone, she stood beside them. And in that humility, she reached hearts that Hollywood never could. She spoke softly, often smiling as she described the moment she let go of her stage name. Vanity was just a word, she said. Denise was the woman God loved all along. Her words carried power because they came from truth. She apologized publicly for her old songs, calling Nasty Girl stupid and empty. She told fans to forget that music, to fill their minds with something cleaner, something lasting. Some critics saw irony in that a woman once known for sensuality now preaching purity, but to those who knew her story, it was nothing short of grace in motion. Her testimony spread across America, from California to Georgia, and even overseas. Churches invited her to speak about redemption and transformation. In each place, she spoke with quiet conviction. God didn't just save me from drugs, He saved me from myself. In 2010, she published her autobiography, Blame It on Vanity, Hollywood, Hell, and Heaven, a self-released book filled with raw confession and poetic reflection. It wasn't a bestseller, but it touched those who needed it, most people fighting their own addictions, searching for their own second chance. Her life, once defined by glamour, became a living parable about forgiveness. Fans from the 1980 decade rediscovered her, not through nostalgia but through respect. They saw a woman who had walked through fire and chosen light. Media outlets began to revisit her story, calling her one of the most dramatic transformations in entertainment history, from sex symbol to servant of faith. Christian publications praised her courage. Even former colleagues in Hollywood, people who once shared her spotlight, spoke of her with reverence. In her sermons, Denise often said, "Hollywood gave me a name. God gave me a purpose." That single line summed up her legacy. She didn't just turn her life around, she redefined what redemption could look like in an industry built on illusion. By the time her health began to fade again, she had already left behind something far greater than fame, a living testimony that brokenness can become beauty when grace takes hold. She was no longer the reflection in someone else's mirror. She had finally become her own light. By the mid-2010 decade, Denise Matthews was no longer a name that echoed in Hollywood, but in small churches and quiet living rooms, her story was still changing lives. She didn't have the luxury of wealth or comfort. Her body, fragile from years of damage, had become her greatest burden, yet she bore it with peace. In 2015, she was diagnosed with a painful intestinal disease called sclerosis, encapsulating peritonitis, a condition linked to her long battle with kidney failure. The pain was constant, and the medical bills overwhelming. For the first time in decades, she reached out to the public again, not as vanity, not even as a celebrity, but as a woman in need. She started a small GoFundMe campaign, hoping to raise $50,000 for her treatment. The total never reached that goal. It didn't matter to her. What moved her most were the messages that came with each donation. Old fans writing to tell her that her testimony had helped them recover, believe, or forgive. She said those notes were worth more than money. By early 2016, her condition worsened. Friends said she remained calm, reading her Bible daily, still sharing gratitude for the little things. A sunrise, a phone call, a prayer. Then, on the 15th of February 2016, Denise Matthews passed away from kidney failure. She was 57 years old. The news hit quietly, a few lines in newspapers, some tributes online. But for those who remembered her, it felt like a closing chapter of a story they had grown up with. The woman who once ruled dance floors and movie screens had left the world with grace, not spectacle. 2 months later, the world would lose Prince, the man who had once called her his mirror. He died on the 21st of April 2016, also at 57. The symmetry of their lives, their fame, their fall, their faith, struck something deep in the hearts of fans. It felt like the universe had drawn a full circle. After her passing, conversations about Vanity began to shift. She was no longer just remembered for Nasty Girl or The Last Dragon, but for her courage to walk away from everything that defined her. Documentaries and retrospectives began to include her story, not as scandal, but as inspiration, the woman who turned her life into a sermon. Her former bandmates, musicians, and fans around the world shared tributes. Many spoke of her laughter, her sincerity, her willingness to forgive. Some said that when she walked into a room, you could feel light follow her, not the artificial glow of fame, but something far gentler. In the years since, her name continues to surface in conversations about redemption in Hollywood, how few ever managed to truly escape its gravity. Denise did. She didn't just leave Hollywood, she transcended it. Her story reminds us that success and salvation are two different things. She had both, one that faded and one that lasted. In the end, the woman once known as Vanity left behind no empire, no awards, no fortune, only a legacy of truth, faith, and forgiveness. And perhaps that was the most beautiful thing she ever created. She once stood in front of a mirror with a brush in her hand, pretending it was a microphone. That mirror followed her everywhere, from the dressing rooms of Niagara Falls to the sound stages of Hollywood, to the hospital where she faced her own reflection one last time. For most of her life, that reflection was called Vanity, a name that celebrated beauty, fame, and the illusion of control. But when she finally laid that name down, what remained was something far more real. Denise Matthews, a woman who learned that faith can rebuild what fame destroys. Her story isn't just about a singer or an actress, it's about a human being who dared to face her own brokenness and find redemption in it. She showed us that success isn't measured by applause or headlines, it's found in the quiet courage to start over. When we remember Vanity today, we remember two lives, the glitter and the grace, the stage lights and the sanctuary, the woman the world desired and the soul that God saved. She didn't just escape Hollywood, she transformed it, showing that there's life after the lights go out. In a world that worships fame, Denise Matthews became a rare kind of legend, the kind who walked away. Her legacy reminds us that beauty fades, music changes, but truth remains. She may have been forgotten by Hollywood, but not by those who still believe that redemption is possible. As the credits roll on her story, we're left with a question: do you think Hollywood ever gave her the respect she truly deserved? If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and help us keep these memories alive. Drop a comment below, tell us what you remember most about Vanity, or share the name of another star you think the world forgot. Because here, on Stars Underrated, we give flowers to those who never got them. We remember the voices that once filled the airwaves and the souls who quietly walked away. Denise Matthews left behind no mansion, no awards, no gold records that could outlast time. But she left behind something greater, the proof that even the most dazzling lives can find peace in surrender. And maybe that's the lesson she wanted us to carry. Some stars don't fade, they just find a brighter light.